Good morning, everyone. My name is Deborah Gallant. You are joining Forever Forward, which is a program that we run every month, bringing our small business owners some fundamental learning that we think that you might want to access and learn about. Obviously, it's optional. It's in addition to our peer groups. And today I'm actually really delighted to bring a presenter who I worked with when I used to be at E4All, Besse. I know when people think about insurance, I don't know, does anybody else think about this? That scene in Groundhog Day where Ned tries to shake Bill Murray's hand and sell him insurance on the curb in the rain every single day. Does anyone else
Life insurance.
You know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, Cam is the anti-Ned. I mean, he really can make it accessible. And it's not like it's a fun topic. Ooh, let's get up this morning and talk about insurance. But it's so necessary, which is why I have invited him to join us for this hour. So we are going to leave plenty of time for questions. I'm going to share screen and get started. I welcome all of you as we... Let's see if we can find I definitely do not mean that screen. Let's find the presentation. It's here somewhere. I'm sorry that you have to watch me be incompetent, but this is the way it works sometimes. And in the recording, of course, I will cut all of this out. Here we go. Use slideshow. All right. An official welcome. You are at a Forever Forward about insuring my small business, your small business. I'm going to let Cam introduce himself in a minute, but he's up here in the Berkshires with me. And he has worked at a couple different firms. Now he works at Aon. I am the senior program manager at Entrepreneurs Forever, and I bring you this program and all the other ones that we do. We will talk a little bit about who Entrepreneurs Forever is. We'll get into the presentation and have our sharing. I'm actually going to skip this because we're actually a pretty big group. But if you want to type into the chat the name and the type of business you're in, that would actually be really informative for Cam and I as we answer your questions. So I think, Chris, you're a framer. Like, just say, Christopher, Pittsburgh, I'm a framer, so that will help him understand what your business is. Our mission is to equalize opportunity by connecting often overlooked small business owners with the peers, skills, and support they need to succeed. We have a weekly information session that's actually run by me and my colleague Marlon, who is also on this call. And if you are not already a member and you're interested in learning more, please join us for one of these. We do have another program next Monday that is fantastic. I know that because I put it together, about getting certified as a woman or minority-owned business. And if it's one of those things you always wondered about and wondered whether it was worth doing, this will be a terrific webinar for you. It's 4:00 next Monday. So this presentation does not take the place of professional advice from your own paid advisors. You can't come back and sue us if you said, oh, but Cam and Deborah said I didn't need that kind of insurance. You are on your own. So please make sure you talk to your own advisors. And here's the thing, even if you really don't want to think about it, as the owner of your business, you do incur risk. One of my favorite things about Cam's presentation for when he did it for E4All was he shows a truck going into a restaurant. And it's like, okay, what are the risks here? And people are like, oh, well, there's this one, and there's this one, and there's this one. Literally, by just saying you're in business, you are assuming risk, and insurance can help maybe not eliminate it, but at least reduce it to a manageable size. And here's the other thing. Even if you think I'm a little business, it's just me. I'm Deborah, the consultant working out of my basement. Yet your personal and household insurance does not carry over if your consulting practice gets in trouble. You will be in trouble. So I thought we could just start by asking what's been your experience with insurance, but I think, Cam, you're going to ask that too. So I'm going to skip this for now, and we're going to put that in there. I want to go right to Cam, where we'll have some time for questions, and I do have a handout. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Cam, why don't you introduce yourself, start the conversation about insurance. I'll attach the handout for everybody, and then we'll come back to you.
Sounds great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me, by the way, Deborah. This is, like Deborah said, the fourth time, I think, third or fourth time I've done a presentation for her programs, and we've always changed the presentation a little bit, but this one I'm very much looking forward to. It seems like you all have existing businesses, they're thriving, and I'm looking forward to share my knowledge and hopefully make it a little bit more simple when you think of the topic insurance. A little bit about me. Do you want to pull up the slides first, Deborah, before I go
Okay,
into that?
I'll
Or
be right with you
yeah,
there. I just wanted to
a
give them
little
all
slide
the
to accommodate it.
attachment. Yep. And see, now I lose the presentation again. I'm not good at this. All right.
There it is.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. So a little bit about me. Again, pleasure to meet you all. I'm located in Massachusetts in the Berkshires, so Western Massachusetts. I'm a licensed property and casualty insurance producer. All that essentially means producer is the terminology we use. It means I can produce new business on the insurance front. There's also different types of insurance licenses that are, varying in needs, but that means I can produce a business's insurance. I'm an account executive for Aon Risk Services. If you haven't heard Aon before, they're one of the largest insurance agencies in the world. They're actually based out of London, but I work remote, fortunately, out of the New York City office. My hobbies include cooking, pickleball, and like you probably guess, every insurance agent, I play golf. I mean, what the most cliche thing of all time, insurance agents play golf. That's me too. And again, it's a pleasure to meet you all. So I just want to go over the agenda here. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. And if I go too fast or if I kind of skim over a topic that you want to hear more about, I do have at the very end a little Q&A session, but also feel free to raise your hand. And if I see it or speak up, I will stop. I will elaborate more. I'm happy to go as deep as you guys need me to cover, the needs you guys have. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the insurance and why it's important. What types of coverages, the basic, high level, what type of insurance coverages there are, the most commonly purchased coverages that you probably are going to use or find in your business, and then have you consider coverages, ones that you maybe haven't considered before in the past, maybe heard about it from your agent. I'm going to elaborate on why you may want to consider them. It doesn't apply to all businesses, but make sure that we educate you as we go along this process. And then one of the more important things we're going to go over is how do you select the right agent? Because ultimately, you can put so much time into insurance. The agent is going to be the person who's really, frontiering your insurance program. So making sure that you select the right person or team to manage your insurance program. And then any questions you should be asking your agent, just to make sure you're getting the most out of that relationship. And of course, a Q&A at the very end.
The handout that we created gives you some just places to write notes about types of insurance coverages and the questions to ask your agent. So hopefully it's a good takeaway, but it's not meant to replace the presentation. It's not, the information isn't there. It's just a note taking.
So why is it important? Why is insurance important? So it protects against unexpected costs, things that you can't foresee ever. The most common types of coverages you can purchase are going to cover bodily injury, property damage, medical expenses, libel and slander, lawsuits and settlements, and many more things. I have here, just for an example, who knows what this picture is on the right? Anyone have a guess what that may be? More recent news.
Montpelier, Vermont, flooded, right?
Bingo. Who's that, Mike?
Wow, that's a good one.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's more recent. It's in 2023 in July. There was a massive flood from the river. They had about 2 weeks of rain and runoff water. I only use this example because I went up to Vermont this summer after the flood, and I couldn't believe what I saw. It really devastated the town. In that occurrence, there was over $200 million of property damage reported, most of which to the businesses in the downtown. There were 800 businesses affected, and the majority of those businesses did not carry something called flood insurance, which is not required for most people. It's only required if you're along the water side and you're in a certain flood zone that designates that you need to have it for either obtaining loans or to even run a business in a certain district. In that case, many of those businesses did not survive. If you go through the town today, it's kind of rebuilding, but you can see a lot of open and vacant shops. It's really sad, but again, they couldn't see it coming. And insurance can cover things like that. Again, it's not required to have flood insurance. And for many of you, you may never encounter this kind of issue. You may live in a higher elevation area. But this is, one of the reasons why insurance is important, because it could keep you in business if you didn't have that coverage in place. So the types of coverages, there are two different, general types of insurance coverages that I'm going to be going over. There are different other versions that are available, like disability and life insurance and health insurance. I'm sure you've heard of all those. I am not licensed in those areas. I'm going to keep it to the property and casualty sections. So casualty is another word for liability, by the way. You might hear the word casualty. It's really just another word for liability. And what I have under those categories are just the basic, general coverages that you may find yourself purchasing with your business. So for property coverage, there's commercial property. Think about like business personal property or building coverage if you own a structure. Commercial auto, covering an auto fleet. There's also liability associated for that, but think about the physical damage to your vehicles if you get into an accident. That could be covered under commercial auto. Business property, I just mentioned it before. It's like contents, anything that's inside of your building. The inland marine coverage, which sounds more fancy than it is. It really is just property that's in transit away from your premises that you actually operate from. That's commercial inland marine. Crime
Commercial
coverages.
inland marine, even though it says marine in there, it is for anything that you've sent. So if it's in transit, is really what it means. Okay.
Yeah, it's that's the most basic way of thinking about it. It's anything that's away or in transit away from your business in movement. The inland marine, I don't know the actual derivative of where marine came from, but there is ocean marine too, which is anytime there's anything that's in a conveyance going overseas through shipment. So same concept, but overseas. So there's ocean marine, and then there's an inland marine.
So
now, unless
if you order something, let's say you're a manufacturer here or you're a retailer here and you order something from China, is it insured until it gets to you by the people who sent it? Or do you have to insure it if you've ordered it and it's shipped from China?
It depends. It depends on the agreement you have with the logistic companies. If you have an FOB shipment agreement, for example, that's free on board, right? That means freight on board is covered by them, but it's not covered by, you don't have to pay the insurance. So as soon as it comes off board, it can be covered. There's different terminology and agreements you can have with these companies. Now, if you're...
and it would be the same thing if you shipped a bunch of whatever it is you make, your hot sauce, to a retail store across the country. Does UPS or FedEx's insurance cover it, or do I need to insure it?
It can. It depends on. So if you have a certain valuation, if you ever look at the contracts with UPS or FedEx, they may have something that has, anything under $1,000 in value can be covered. Anything above that, you have to purchase an insurance that is, based on the weight or the valuation determined of that product. So if you have like a fine art piece, for example, right? You're sending it overseas, you may have to purchase, $500 of insurance to get the physical damage covered if anything was to happen. So it really depends, Deborah.
Oh, I think we're going to hear a lot of "it depends" today. And let me just clarify though, am I buying that insurance from my shipper? Like, is in addition to paying for the shipment, they add it on, or do I need my insurance agent to cover it?
It can be, if you
it depends.
It depends. Exactly. Well, it depends on how your program is currently structured. If you have a standalone, which standalone means you have a single policy that's called an inland marine policy, that can cover a lot of those occurrences without the need to purchase anything from a FedEx or UPS or a 3PL provider, third-party logistic provider. If you're a smaller business, say like you're a restaurant and you're just shipping a table left to right, it may not be cost efficient to buy one of those policies on their own because it depends on the size of it, but they're going to be, over $1,000 each, so it may be more cost efficient to go right to the carrier. So it really depends on your business. And I will be saying a lot of "it depends" because this is a fluid, insurance is very fluid. They're very customizable products in general.
Well, and I think that it really goes to your point about choosing an agent. If your agent isn't digging in and asking these questions, so I know Cindy does fine art. It's like, if they don't ask you what's the value of what you're shipping, then they really don't understand your business and aren't really going to be helping you. So make sure you find somebody who drills down and asks those questions.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I've distracted you with my questions already.
But
It's
thank
great
you.
questions.
Those were helpful. Thank you.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's a great question, actually. Really good. And by the way, Christopher said in the chat, UPS covers $100. So it's even lower than what I estimated it could be. So just keep that in mind. If you're ever shipping something overseas, look at the contract, and I would just send it to your agent, candidly, see what they say.
One other question. So when you have that insurance, is that for the year or is that a one-time purchase for that shipment?
If you're buying it from UPS and FedEx, and
It's a
whoever they're
right.
probably using Allianz as an insurance company or something like that. It's a name of insurance company. That would be probably per occurrence. So you buy it one time, flat fee, there it is. If you buy it with your agent, again, if it makes sense for you, it will cover you for an annual basis.
Okay, thank you.
And if you were an e-commerce seller, maybe you're selling high-end jewelry and doing a lot of shipping, it might make sense to have sort of a bigger policy so you don't have to buy it. Or, let me just put it the other way, you could actually require your purchaser to pay for the insurance for each incident and just pass it along to them with each shipment. So I think there's lots of ways to think about it. That's why you need a great insurance agent. Go ahead.
Perfect. And again, we can go over more questions at the very end too. I want to make sure we get through a lot of the content here.
Great. Do you want to talk about the liability side now?
Yep, liability section. So general liability is the most common liability you're going to see. It's going to cover your business's liability for property damage to third parties or bodily injury to third parties. So those two types of events can be covered under general liability. Commercial umbrella is excess of the underlying policies. I know that sounds like a lot. It just means that you can have insurance above what the coverages are underneath it. So if I have an auto policy that has $1 million of liability limit and I have a general liability policy that has $1 million per occurrence liability limit, I can buy an additional maybe $5 million on top of that in the event that the occurrence that happens costs way more money in terms of liability and exposure and over the $1 million, because $1 million nowadays does not go as far as it used to. So some people and some businesses feel that they're exposed. They might purchase an umbrella policy to get them more liability limits. Professional liability or errors in omission. This coverage is going to cover your professional services for financial damages and also property damage to third parties from the professional services you give out. Very common coverage for any sort of consultant or professional service provider, doctors.
Cam, well, I imagine doctors have a bunch of other issues, but when I was acting as a full-time business coach, the International Coach Federation had to deal with a company and you could just buy it online and it was quite inexpensive at the time. Yeah. But I would imagine that, again, it doesn't really understand the nuance of my business. So just saying, oh, I'm covered because I bought my insurance through ICF, you need to ask some questions, right?
Yeah, what does it cover? And, what are there's maybe some exclusions that are involved in that. Not saying, Deborah, that you bought the wrong thing. A lot of times, if you're part of a association, you can go into a purchasing group where you can buy, a very cost-efficient product because they're making it specific to that group. So it doesn't, again, it depends on the situation in your business.
Well, one of the things that I had been worried about was that I advised people about their websites, and a website is critical to people's business now. And I'm certain that the coaching insurance didn't cover if something bad happened to the website and then they wanted to come back and say, Deborah, you told me to do this. So you got to be really careful.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry, I keep distracting you. Go ahead.
No, it's perfect. Product liability. This covers the liability derived from your product. It also can cover your services too, depending on how it's written. So this is if you sell or manufacture a product, you sell it to consumers, and they come back and sue you because that product caused danger or damage or bodily injury to them from the use of that product. Unforeseen kind of circumstances. They can't say, hey, the knife stabbed me, It's got
I
to be something
remember
where,
when we had a gal in Ephraim who sold a product to babies, and we pointed out to her all the risks because baby products are highly regulated. You know, when
absolutely.
her manufacturer from China put together the product, can she promise that it's not going to cause a rash or an illness, or a child isn't going to choke on it? Really, really important.
Right. Exactly. And I'll kind of go into how you could buy this a little bit in the next slide. This is something that you might be able to find in a typical package, but again, we'll go more into that a little later. Directors and officers liability. This is going to cover the liability for any decisions made by directors, officers of a corporation. And it's going to cover, obviously bodily injury, property damage, but also the financial damages from those decisions that they make. You tend to find this coverage with more, larger entities who have a board of advisors, who make a larger impact in the communities. So this is something where, as you grow, consider this, especially for your board level members. Cyber liability. This is a hot button in my industry. It's one that is, this product is still being developed, in my opinion. It's been around for 30, 40 years, but because cyber events are changing so much and hackers getting so sophisticated, we have AI and we have cloud, and we have all these advancements in technology every year. Cyber liability is becoming more expensive year over year, because the dangers and exposures are growing so fast. So I would say this is the best time to buy cyber, because I don't think the price has caught up to the level of exposure you're really brought to as a business, but it's going to cover your network security liability, even some first party coverages, like if your website's down and you're an e-commerce company, you cover some of the business loss or loss of income when that site is down. You can also cover extortion events or cyber crime events like social engineering fraud, where somebody impersonates another employee of yours and then embezzles money out of your company. So again,
this is a great coverage, and I'm so glad you brought it up. I want to point out that when we did our deep dive on cybersecurity, the guy who presented said, these policies require you to have done X, Y, and Z before the coverage works. So if you don't have a firewall and sufficient security and the passwords and all the other things you need, the insurance isn't worth having, because it won't really cover it, because they'll say, oh, where's your firewall? And you go, oh, you didn't have one. Then it won't cover it. So make sure
exactly
you
right.
actually read your fine prints.
Yep, exactly. Employers' liability or workers' compensation. If you have employees, you probably have this coverage, or you're required to have this coverage. And I just want to put a caveat here for workers' compensation. If you have just yourself and another business partner as employees, you won't be required to have this coverage. It's really for people who are not, officers or owners of the company. So the moment you start having employees, you need to have workers' compensation coverage. Employer's liability is just covering the liability as an employer for negligence to your employees' health and harm. But workers' compensation as a whole is going to reimburse, for medical expenses when an employee gets injured.
And
employment practices.
Yeah.
Yep. I was just going to say employment, and the last one on the list here is EPL, or employment practices liability. This is going to cover any sort of wrongful act that happens as an employer, for wrongful termination, defamation, different employment related occurrences. And I'll go more into this as I go to a later slide. So most commonly purchased stuff or coverages. I want to just quickly brief a lot of these, but also kind of give you a little bit of a background where you could find it, because I think this can be very applicable for a lot of businesses here, just based on reading the chat. If you own a building, in general, right, you're going to need to purchase building coverage. And this is part of a property coverage form. It covers the physical damage of a structure that you own. It can also be something in your care, custody, and control. So you don't have to own it. This doesn't happen often. You might have a lease agreement where you actually are, like a triple net lease, where you are owning, own it, but you're paying rent, but you're also paying all the costs, including the insurance costs of that building. So building coverage is going to cover any of the structure, the walls, the outside walls, the exterior, right, the roof, everything. The only thing you can't insure is the land itself and the stuff that's underground, like the sewer and the piping and whatnot. Business personal property or contents coverage, on the other hand, is something that most businesses are going to encounter. This can be in computer equipment, paper, chairs, furniture. This can be purchased on any sort of commercial property coverage form. Who here, let me ask, who here has heard of the business owner policy before or has one in place? Anyone? Okay. This is a type of policy that is a package that insurance companies develop that has basically everything that most coverages that everyone needs at a small business level. So it's going to include, if you have a building, it can cover the building coverage. It's going to definitely include the business personal property or content coverage. You can include the business income coverage, the one underneath that, which is the general liability coverage. It's one big package that's priced pretty well for every average small business. As long as you're within a certain appetite for them and your business exposures, you should be able to purchase this type of product. So you could find this product there, as well as you could buy it on a standalone policy, property policy. And this is going to cover everything that if you take the building, flip it upside down, take the roof off, anything that falls out, generally speaking, can be covered under this type of coverage, business personal property. Business income is one where I find a lot of businesses are underinsured on, but I can argue whether or not you actually need to have the full insurance. So what this can cover is any sort of lost income or even loss of ability to pay rents, or even if you're a landlord, like if you have a bunch of properties, the ability to take in rent. It can cover that after a covered loss. So let's assume that you have, a fire, right? That's covered. If you were now unable to do business for the next 6 months, the loss of income can be covered under business income coverage. And on that point, real quick, I don't have a slide for this, unfortunately, but I did make note of this in my notes here. There are 3 different types of coverage forms for property coverage. There's a basic coverage form, broad coverage form, and special or all risk coverage form. Have any of you guys heard that term before? Special coverage? No? Seems to knows. This is a type of coverage form that's going to cover, the most comprehensively for property coverages. So something that you may never heard of before is the basic form, which is going to cover things like fire, lightning, explosion, wind, hail, smoke, riot, vandalism. And then the broad form, which can be offered by insurance companies, is going to offer some more coverages from that. So they're going to cover, volcanic activity, sprinkler leakage, falling objects, weight of snow or ice or sleet, things like that. And then the special form is going to cover all risks except for a list of exclusions, which are like war, flood, power failure, intentional acts, things like that.
I assume that nothing covers a pandemic, right?
Well, yeah. As of right now, the way the language is, it's not. Now, there are some companies who are offering some buybacks where you can actually cover pandemics, but that's way too nitty gritty. It really applies to more doctors and medical facilities and nursing homes. But anyways, on my point here, I just make sure when you buy this coverage, if you're buying any property coverage, just buy the special coverage or all risk coverage. Make sure your agent's selling you that because it's the most comprehensive and the price difference is so minimal for most businesses. You really want to consider a lower coverage form if you're choosing as a business to self-insure a lot. And the reason why you're self-insuring is because you have so much cash on the sideline that if something happened, we'll just take the insurance savings and apply it there. That's the methodology here. So make sure it's a special coverage form. General liability coverage. This is, again, covering property damage and bodily injury, covering your business liability in general. It's covering anything the third party. These are something that if you're going to buy any package or any business owner policy, it's going to include this coverage. And it comes in typically $1 million per occurrence, $2 million for an aggregate, which means that through the entire annual year, you have $2 million of overall coverage available to you, but only $1 million each occurrence is available to you. And again, if you want higher coverage or limits, the easiest way is either to make that a $2 million per occurrence, $4 million aggregate, or to purchase an umbrella policy to go above it, which is going to cover the excess liability, probably more price efficiently. So I tend to
And
recommend
let me just
the
ask
umbrella.
you, if you're a, let's say, $125,000 a year consultant or coach, or, you know, some headhunter, you know, translator, something like that, it
Mhm.
feels to me like $1 million in coverage seems so much higher than any harm that could come to me. Tell me why these numbers seem so out of whack for a small business.
Well, it's a good question. It's going to come down to what you do. I would argue that most businesses do not need more than $1 million for professional services. It becomes an issue when you're working with contracts that are, you know, you're receiving $800,000 a clip of, you know, payment for your contract, right? Because ultimately what you can get sued for is, you know, your failure to deliver a service and the damages that, you know, occurs because of your service, including bodily injury. So if I'm a doctor, for example, you know, if I was to, you know, have a surgery on a very, very high net worth lawyer, and because of my services, he no longer is able to operate as a lawyer or, you know, conduct his business as a lawyer, he may lose, you know, $1 million a year of income. Now all of a sudden I need to consider higher limits for my type of service because my people that I'm operating on may be, you know, losing income or have damages that are, you know, surpassing the $1 million limit. If I'm a consultant and I'm only, you know, having $50,000 contracts here or there, and my overall contract or revenue is about $1 million, you're right to say, Deborah, that my overall exposure might be less than $1 million. So I shouldn't consider it. But if to add to it, if my service is, you know, I'm proposing that people put in, you know, infrastructure in the downtown area, and my recommendations are that they create this large bridge over a park. Right? I'm just making this up, you know, and someone was to jump off the bridge and hurt themselves. All of a sudden, my recommendation might be, you know, I might be sued or brought into a lawsuit because of my recommendation. And, you know, there might be some unforeseen exposures here that I might want to consider a higher coverage. So it really depends on the level of professional service you're offering as a business.
Thank you.
Did I explain that okay? I'm trying to make up scenarios here in my head, so I know that some of them might not make too much sense. Workers' compensation, I already went into this a second ago. Again, this is covering the bodily injury and accidents for your employees while they're working. It's highly regulated by the states. In most states, and I think I'm looking at the chat here, most states you guys are in, it's something that you have to have and you can get from an insurance agent. In certain states, you have to go to the state itself and purchase it directly with them. They're called monopolistic states. And there's really no leeway on pricing for these products. Your agent's just going to go to any company. They're going to offer the same price, whoever they go to, essentially. There might be some wiggle room with some credits and commission, but it's basically regulated by the state. Commercial auto or fleet coverage. If you have a large fleet of vehicles, you know, make sure you cover, just like your personal auto cover insurance, make sure you cover the physical damage if you want to on vehicles, and the liability as a business. I will say there's one thing that most people don't consider, and that is if your employees are driving to and from job sites, there is liability, and even with their own car, there is liability for your business. It may be small, but it's certainly there. If an employee was to go from point A to point B, and on the way there, you know, crash into a Mack truck, whatever it may be, or some civilian and injure them severely, that lawyer for the person who got injured is going to look in to see who is the person who injured my person, my client, and were they working? And they're going to ask themselves whether or not, you know, they can sue the business that was, you know, while that person's on call or working, you know, who is the business above them, because you're going to go for the deepest pockets. So there's a coverage you can have included in most of your coverage forms called hired and non-owned auto, which is a very helpful coverage. It's not that expensive, like usually $500 minimum coverage on their additional premium. That can give you your business coverage in the case that's brought into a lawsuit from one of your employees driving around town during business hours.
Where Cam and I live, almost always the workers who arrive to work on your house are coming in their own cars, because we're so spread out that, they could live in Albany, they could live in Beckett, they could live wherever. They're not going to a central place to get in a company vehicle to come to your house. They're coming to your house from their home, and that is not insignificant. So thanks for pointing that out.
Welcome. And we talked about professional liability, so I won't hit on that too much more. That's the last one. Again, professional services, it depends on your business. So certain coverages I want to just highlight that you may not need, but you may want to consider as you keep moving forward. And it doesn't apply for all businesses. Just want to put a caveat here, and this is certainly not a recommendation for all. But cyber liability, it is a perception that, oh, all the hacks happen to, 3M or GE or the hospital systems in my area. The reality is most people experience, the most hacks is going to happen to the personal person. It's going to happen to your grandma. It's also going to happen to small business. Most frequent hacks. Now, there may not be as much damage, so you don't hear about it in the news, but they're the most frequent, highest frequency in cyber events is happening at a small business level. I have a stat here from my company that I work for. 40% of companies lack the necessary controls, security controls, which is absolutely true. Most people do not have the right security systems, even like an incident response team available in the case that something happened. Like if an event happened to your business, do you really know what you're going to do next? Most companies don't think about that. It can cover data breaches, network failures, cyber extortion, cyber crimes, loss of income from an event. Sometimes you could purchase reputational harm if you were to have a cyber incident, some sort of loss of economic ability. So again, it's a coverage that I highly recommend you consider. At a small business level, it's like Deborah mentioned, it's important that you have multi-factor authentication on emails. It's going to be important that you have certain firewalls installed. But for the most part, it's something you can work with your agent and the insurance company on to know exactly what you need to have this coverage. And I recommend it for a lot of people, especially if you're handling payments. Anytime you have any sort of processing of payments, even if you use a third party, there's still inherent exposure there, and it's highly worth considering the coverage. I see a hand up here. Mike, you have a question?
Just curious, cyber can encompass a whole lot of bad actions. What is the predominant one for, small businesses, or is it ransomware?
Ransomware is common. Yeah, that's a very common one. Data breaches in general, right? If you're holding data, right, that's what they want. They know data. They know the cost per item of data. But yeah, ransomware, we see a lot of, one thing that you can't find as much ability to find coverage for is social engineering. It's when you have somebody pose as a third party that they're sitting and squatting your email, and they pose as one of the people in your email, and they ask for immediate funds from a lower ranking employee. That's a very common one that insurance companies have tightened up so much on because the occurrences are so frequent on. But yeah, ransomware is a very common one. They come in there, they plant a bug in your system, say you have to pay me 1 Bitcoin by next week, otherwise you're going to delete all of your data and expose all of your data to the third-party web or the dark web, right? Whatever it may be, and you have to pay them a Bitcoin, right? So that's your most common occurrences. But you're right to say, Mike, there's a large slew of different occurrences that can happen. In most policies you purchase, or at least the more comprehensive companies you go to, like a Chubb or Travelers or Coalition, they're a big one too. They're going to offer coverage for almost everything you can think of in the cyber world, ones you never heard of before.
Is the coverage financial, or do they provide, like, we will help you fix this coverage? We have
both. Yeah, well, you don't have to purchase all the coverages, but they can offer it. We can fix this is called breach response or incident response. There's a couple of different titles around the industry. That's when you have an occurrence, you go to your insurance company and they can actually act as a incident response plan for you. They have a team internally, typically, that is working solely on incident response, and they can help recover your systems. And there's a limitation for that as well in your policy. And they can also try to, fix whatever the issue may be. If it's a ransomware event, obviously nullify the issue. There's also another thing you may never considered, which is privacy notification laws by the state. if you live in California, for example, if you have a cyber incident, you are required to go to every single customer, email them, let them know about the attack. And if there's any sort of, payments that were hacked, there's PCI fines that are incredibly high for small businesses to encompass. So sometimes purchasing the policy is more about the incident response than it is about the liability you have for a business.
Yeah, I just got a letter from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. They'd been hacked and their data had been sucked out. And so
Yeah.
they were offering some monitoring something. I haven't fully read the letter.
Cost them a
Right.
lot of money when that happened.
It's crazy. Oftentimes more than what the ransomware demand was. Like
I
they
don't
asked
think
for
I don't think this was ransomware. This was a data stealing,
data breach. Yeah.
data breach.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you, Mike. Again, there's so much to think about here. As a small business, I don't want you to go to sleep thinking, oh my God, I don't have cyber coverage. What are the odds, right? But it's worth considering. I tend to find that these policies, depending on the size of your business, can be as low as $1,000, $200, $500. And if you're a much larger business, you might be seeing a $50,000 to $100,000 price tag. I have some clients who are almost $1 million, right? So this is something that is priced for the risk. And again, I feel like it's right now priced lower than some of the potential exposures are for some businesses. It's worth purchasing for a lot of people. Crime coverage. Is there any more questions on cyber before I move on? Okay. So crime coverages, this is one of the most common coverages that I don't see businesses have, but it can be included in a lot of packages, little supplements. This is fidelity from employees or even third parties who come in and embezzle or steal funds from your company. 56% of small retail businesses say that they experienced theft from stores in the past year, according to new data from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, right? So we tend to find that there's a lot of small cash losses that happen for small businesses, especially restaurants. And there's minimum coverage or minimal coverages that are provided on a lot of packages, usually about $5,000 or $10,000 of coverage. So if you do feel like you have a lot of cash on hand as a business, consider carrying a higher limit. And also consider, what is my internal risk? Do I have, employee plans, for example? Do I have benefits that I give to my employees? Consider getting a fiduciary liability policy or RISA coverage, is another word for it, which can cover, any sort of dishonesty from an actor inside your company for the mishandling of employee benefit plans. So there's different.
Cam,
Yep.
I have a silly question. I was at the Red Lion the other night and somebody was signing the check and writing, room, whatever it was. And apparently it's a huge problem that people assign their check to a fake room. They actually ask to see your key. But really, so the Red Lion is sitting there with an unpaid dinner. They're not going to claim that against their insurance, right? That's just a business loss.
No. Yeah, the insurance company is going to have a deductible for the Red Lion, especially their larger business. They will have a deductible. That's considered petty. It's considered too small to insure. I mean, you could, if there's a collection of them at one occurrence, right? You could theoretically get
Or they
insurance
charge the whole
coverage.
banquet to the room, then we're there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a business practice problem, and the insurance company will want to have no touch on that kind of occurrence. You should be tightening your business processes versus going to insurance programs.
Some restaurants will put that on the server for not getting paid.
Oh, wow. That would be really tough.
Well, they lost their tip, right? So I guess it is on them.
They make them cover the bill.
Oh, yeah.
That's unfair.
It's like if somebody does a dine and dash, but anyhow.
All right,
yeah.
let's go to employment practice liability.
EPL, I talked about this earlier. I just want to touch on it a little bit more. So it's sexual harassment, discrimination, wrongful termination of business liability. This is your decisions as a business, in terms of employment practices. I find that this is something that's extremely underpurchased on a small commercial level for a good reason, because there's high frequency of claims. And when there is an occurrence, there ever is an EPL claim, the odds are it's going to cost more than you think to settle or to remove the problem. The average out of court settlement, according to AmTrust, was $75,000, and the average jury award was $217,000. When it got to court, 217K. is the average we found. I can affirm I've seen that firsthand with a lot of companies. The minimum you see is 75K costs. Your policy may actually already include this if you have a business owner policy or a package, but they typically give you a supplement of $25,000, sometimes 50 or 100K, depending on your size business. So they're saying we'll cover up to $25,000 automatically. So you have something, but again, if you have this type of occurrence, you have employees and you're making a lot of, or just have a large number of employees in general, really consider this coverage. You can buy a standalone policy of this. They are getting more expensive because we're such a litigious country that in general, the price of this is going up year over year.
Could this apply if all you do is use contractors and not have them as employees?
It could. So you're saying if you're using like
there's like a translation service that is just joining us, she's the only full-time employee, but she uses like 100 independent contractors. Can they use this employment liability to come back at her?
Well, it depends on who's making the decisions for the employee, right? So who's defining, who's really taking care of this employee, who's paying them, who's giving directions to this employee, and who has also the say of what they do in terms of promotions and termination. So if it's a contractor, right, you could have coverage through them, like they may already have their own coverage. The only thing I'm thinking about here as your business, if you were to have any employee of yours do any sexual harassment to that third party, that sexual harassment can actually be covered under employment practices liability. There's a certain clause called a third party clause that you can purchase under the policy. And most policies come with it. So you typically have to elect to exclude it from your policy. So in your case, you may want to consider it if you have any sort of reason to believe that sexual harassment or discrimination could be occurring with your employees as they interact with third parties.
Yeah, if you have 100 contractors, you can't know what all of them are doing, right?
Right. All right, selecting the agent. I'm going to try to zoom back by this. I know we're kind of getting close on time here, and I want to leave time with the Q&A. So selecting the agency. One of the most important steps of your business is going to be deciding, or at least for insurance perspective, is going to be deciding who you work with. There's different types of agents available. They come in different sizes and forms, different locations. The most common discrepancy for agents or difference for agents is going to be whether or not they're independent, which means they have access to any company that they're admitted with. So they may have, 20 carriers that they represent rather than a captive, which is point B here, which has one sole carrier they work with. I have found some captives who have alternative carriers that they partner with as well, but they're servicing one carrier. There's advantages to both. The independent agent, obviously, you have more access to things and carriers. So if you have any exposures to businesses or change of exposures, and your business has a shift from being a construction to then also property maintenance too, that change may force you to go to a different carrier. So you can continue working with the same company going forward. Another thing too is you get to keep them honest, because every couple of years you can say, my company's been going up 10, 20%. Are there other carriers available with you that, would offer a more price efficient product for the same thing? So they have more options with pricing and more option with carrier selection. Whereas captive agents, the main thing for captives is that they probably have access to a product that is designed for your industry. They're experts at that one product, so they're going to be Johnny on the spot with that. And more often than not, captive agents, they're given a product that is only given to that captive agent. So they might have a more price efficient product for that one product, right? I, as an independent agent myself, I may not have access to that captive agent's product. So again, it's worth considering if you're with that captive, are they giving me a really good price product? If that's the case, great. Let's stay with them. Otherwise, I typically recommend
I know that that's true for people like who are farmers. There are companies that sell insurance directly for farming risk, right? And they understand farming risk like crazy. But for many of us with a sort of a less specialized point of view, it may be worth going to an independent to see what your options are.
Yeah, certainly. And then I have some bullet points at the bottom here, listing the things you're looking for. And in general, I'm a local community guy. I really think that if you serve the people or work with the people that are in your community, it tends to reciprocate, right? There's a good energy there. So I would ask some questions here. Are they connected to your community? Local independent agencies are everywhere. You can find in every city, every town, a local agency. If they're connected to your community, that's a plus for me. Are they a potential customer? A lot of businesses don't consider this. Are they going to, if you're a restaurant, are they going to use your restaurant as a client of yours or of theirs? Are they going to use your restaurant for the holiday party? Maybe that's a potential client in the future. Are they responsive? This tends to be the most important thing to a lot of people. Are they, listening? Are they answering my questions? If I have a certificate of insurance need or, policy change need, are they getting that response back to me soon? And then are you confident in their process? And what I mean by that is, are you looking at their servicing team and their capabilities? And do you feel confident that they can carry out the duties that you need from them? There's difference between a company like mine where I have 50,000 employees deep, right? And we're really good with big businesses. We may not be as great with the micro business or the smaller business, right? Because we're not structured that way. Whereas an independent agency that's local may be very good at getting a high touch approach with a smaller business, someone who, is a restaurant. They might be able to put more time and effort into that one company than somebody who has, Apple to be insuring with too. So just kind of ask yourself, like, how are they aligned? Here's some questions to ask your agent too, and this is just a list of a few. If you pay the policy in full, will it result in a lower premium? The answer is probably yes. No money is free in America. Believe it or not, you're probably financing. If you're doing monthly payments, you're financing your premium with the insurance company. If you pay in full, there's probably going to be a 3 to 10% interest rate that you could cut off by just paying in full at the beginning of the policy period.
Certainly worth asking if it doesn't get offered to you, right?
Certainly. And a lot of agents don't even go through the administrative questioning of that. They just kind of do it. If it was last year paid in monthly, they're just going to renew it paid in monthly. So ask the question. How regularly do you review my policy? Is it an annual? By the renewal, we'll talk about the policy, and if it's great, perfect. Or are they doing a semi-annual approach where they're reaching out 6 months in, being like, hey, any questions at all? How frequently are they going to be reaching out to you? Who do I contact to file a claim? Now, more often than not, the answer is the agent, but sometimes it might be simple as just to get the contact information from the insurance companies. And, you can email the agent on the back end. It might be a quicker administrative process for you by going directly to the company. What is the best way to reach out to you as in the agent? Is it email? Is it call? Some agents are on the road all the time. They're tough to get to. Maybe it's an email. For me, like, it's a call. Like I always say, give me a call. I'm available. My cell phone. If I raise my deductible, will the annual premium decrease? There is a term, a phrase I always use, which is don't insure a risk you can absorb in general. So if I have, $20,000 as a business sitting around, just sitting there hanging out, why would I ever have a deductible less than $20,000 if I can save 10, 15% of my insurance, right? And what are the odds of a claim anyway? So consider higher deductibles if you have more cash, or even if you don't. I think a lot of people have $500 deductibles without considering that they could probably afford $2,500 and save about 8%, 10%, maybe worth considering. And then as my business grows, how will my insurance program change? I would like to know if an agent has an answer for that. Would if I grow to 25 employees, whereas before I was 10, do you expect any changes? Like in the next 5 years, if I do this, that, and the other, what do I need that I don't have right now, rather than just renewing what I have every year? Have a little game plan with the agent.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing. When I send everyone this deck, you'll have all these links if you want to read more about it and see Cam's sources. But I want to leave some time for Q&A. You've hung in here with us, so I really appreciate it. It was a lot. And, I always frequently start these insurance conversations about asking people if they ever heard about the guy who sued his dry cleaner for a lost pair of pants. people will sue you for anything, and you really need to think as a small business owner, what's my liability? And Kim, you did a wonderful job of summing it up. So, questions? Mike, go ahead.
Very simple question, I think. As a consultant who works out of the house, does it make sense to have my renter's insurance and my business insurance through the same person, company?
You say that the same agent or insurance company?
Yeah, same, yeah.
It, personal insurance, and there is some benefit to having the same company for all products, but when you go from personal insurance to commercial insurance, ultimately the forms and the companies within are actually completely different. A lot of people don't know this. If you go to Travelers, there's a personal insurance company and there's a whole other writing company for, the commercial lines as well. There is some benefit, I think, in terms of administration. If you go to the same insurance agent contact, there's definitely a benefit there. You can go to one person for your personal lines and your commercial lines. But I would say that I would put more stock into the coverage value and the price of the coverage more than, your personal lines being congruent with your commercial lines.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Timothy mentioned needing bonding insurance. I don't think I know what that is.
Bonding, an agreement, right? Any sort of agreement you have with somebody or a guarantee you're making can be bonded. Yeah, so if you have a bonding need, most property and casualty insurance agents can accommodate that with an independent agency. Is there a specific question you have about the product or coverage?
Timothy, did you want to ask your question? I guess not.
Okay. Well, if you have it, let me know.
Jane,
Yeah,
go ahead.
bonding is, yep, go on, Jane.
So for the example of the dry cleaner who loses the pants, I'm not a dry cleaner, but I'm a seamstress who does alterations and embroidery. So it's parallel. What kinds of coverage would you suggest? I've made some notes as you've gone along here.
One more time, you said what do you do? Kind of lost you for a second.
Alterations of clothing and occasional embroidery.
Okay, so you're basically embroidering and altering clothing that a customer comes to you and you're adding stitching or something to that effect.
Relatively similar to the dry cleaner losing the pants. I have somebody's pants in my custody.
Yeah. I mean, what is the cost of the average, clothing you're working on? Like if you had to replace that clothing for the customer, what does it cost?
It's usually under $80. I get occasional not bridal gowns, but bridesmaids gowns. And so then it's probably 200 or less, but.
Okay. Yeah. So it really comes down to this. If there was an occurrence where you took the jeans, I'm just gonna use jeans here, and you're embroidering the jeans and it was like a damage because, you left it on the stove and it combusted in flames. In that case, I mean, an insurance product could be in place. You're probably not going to be able to use it though, because it's so low in cost to replace that item that, it's ultimately a waste of money for you to buy property coverage for that item. So I wouldn't be too frivolous with buying insurance. I would consider having better structure and just having good mitigation techniques to make sure that your clothing are kept well and your customers are happy, versus paying for property insurance in most cases.
That sounds like a self-insurance thing.
Certainly. Yeah.
But
consider, hold on, Deb, if you don't mind, just consider maybe if you're having people come to your house and they're coming over and they slip and fall in your driveway, but they're coming over for business reasons. Let's make sure that there's a business liability limit in place too. You could go to your homeowner's insurance and see if they're able to provide that coverage as an endorsement to your home policy or renter's policy. It might be kind of limited though. Consider just buying a small general liability policy. For what you just said, I can't imagine it being more than, for just general liability, $600 to $1,000 minimum premium, somewhere in that range, which may be worth considering.
Yeah, that was sort of my question, getting those two sort of, so they're together, but you're
because they're working from their home. Yeah. We are at 9:32. If anybody, Chris, did you unmute because you have a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I'm a custom picture framer, and I have people's sentimental items or valuable items, and I'm doing different processes to them. I know there's an insurance company that provides insurance for me working on their items while they're in my possession.
Okay.
So it's a little more specialized. But I've been in business for 43 years, and I have more of a general type of policy. And I believe we've only had to use it one time. Do you think it's better for me to look into the more specific to cover things because of the way society's going with everybody being more litigious?
Again, it's going to depend on the value of the art that you're working on. Like if you're working on $100,000 valued piece of art or frame, you're framing, Da Vinci's, painting, it's obviously a different algorithm than, or answer than if you're doing somebody's, $500 piece. Again, you might be considering self-insuring the property or coverage of the property when it's in your possession, and playing your odds essentially.
But
So let me
I
ask you,
think
Chris.
one of Chris's issues is that they might be a sepia photograph of a great grandparent that literally is irreplaceable, but doesn't have a particular dollar value to it. Am I right, Chris?
Yeah.
Have they been appraised? Any of these these pieces of work that you have?
Some of them are, and some of them aren't. I rarely have anything that's probably valued, like the highest is maybe 25,000.
Okay.
And
Substantial.
so I rarely do I have anything that valuable. It's more like the sentimental value pieces that I'm working on, like a signed jersey, that might be worth, $1,000, something like that.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm thinking here is talk to you have an agent that you work with, independent agent? Perfect. Talk to them and ask the same question, because they may have access to markets that are for fine art collectors or people who work with fine art. And what you're going to be looking for is, my coverage, by property coverage, there could be something called agreed value, which is essentially could be appraisal value as well. And just make sure that the policy, if it does act for those $25,000 items, especially, that it's not just going to replace the baseball with a Rawlings baseball. It's going to say, okay, whoa, this was actually appraised at $25,000. I'm using baseball. I know that you're a framer, but I think you see my point here. Make sure that that is going to be, covering the cost it is to replace the appraised value rather than the replacement value of that item, because it's going to have inherently way less value, right?
Yeah.
So I would ask that question. Just make sure that you have some coverage that can apply coverage for the $25,000 event. I will caution you, I think it'll be unlikely to find really cost-effective coverage, or even a coverage in general, for the $500, $1,000 items appraised, with sentimental value. You can't really insure sentimental value unless it truly was appraised. And even if it wasn't appraised, the insurance company is probably going to say, at the minimum, I want a $500 or $1,000 deductible. So you're paying out of pocket anyway, $1,000. So just again, I'm more concerned about the $25,000 items.
Okay.
As a business.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
All right. Anyone else? Last chance for questions. Cam, this was fantastic. And thank you so much for engaging with us and getting a lot of things going in our head. Hopefully the risks are low and they're manageable. And we so appreciate your coming and working with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all for sitting in and listening to me ramble for an hour. If you have any questions, I'm sure you can shoot it through Deborah or myself.
And I'm going to send you all this deck and his resources and the worksheet again. So thank you all and have a great Veterans Day weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.